Hi, I'm Nick Armstrong, the lead organizer of Fort Collins Startup Week and the Geek-in-Chief behind WTF Marketing. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this webinar. Information like this changes pretty rapidly. I try to make the tips as actionable as possible, but of course, there's probably something that I've missed. And if I have, please feel free to email me at nick@wtfmarketing.com. I'll put it right down here. And if you have any other questions or things that you wish I would have addressed in this particular thing, or if you have a specific question to your industry, your organization, let me know. Please do reach out. Right now, we've all got to have each other's backs. I'm happy to share this information with you, and I hope you find it useful. The first premise of marketing effectively in a crisis, I believe, is consistency. So we've seen across the board quite a few armchair epidemiologists pop up in our timelines. And that's not necessarily a bad thing to want to share information or share pertinent safety information or advice. But think of this in the same way as political posts or other information that you may want to stray away from depending on your type of business. It's not necessarily true that you should avoid all of that if it's relevant to you. If you're a marketplace or a community hub or a nonprofit that deals with a particular type of information that's relevant to you and the information that you're sharing out, then that's where you would be able to do some of that. Sharing out information about how, for instance, the city of Fort Collins turned over the Azatlan Center to a local nonprofit to help assist with some of the homeless sheltering. And so that was a really relevant thing for local organizations that deal with the homeless population to share out. So keep it consistent with your overall tone and your messaging already. And what you do publish out there, if you're asked to reshare or if it's helpful for you to reshare information that is coming through your timeline, then by all means do so. For Fort Collins Startup Week, for instance, we share that out, quite out a bit of information about the city's economic health resources, the SBDCs, the Loveland Chamber, the Fort Collins Chamber. We share out all of that information because it's relevant to our audience and it's also cohesive with our theme. So when you, as an individual, as the person who is in charge of the business or an employee of a business or a representative of a business, go out into the world, it's really important to be intentional with how you show up in a business perspective now too, because a lot of folks are turning to social media to either find that escape or find that consistency or find that connection that they had before, and they want to be able to connect to you in a way that is maybe not the same way that they connect to the nightly news or to their constantly open tab of 9 News or wherever else they're turning for their news right now. It's really important that you stay consistent to who you are and not try to do the armchair epidemiologist thing or share out every little bit of information trying to be a resource in that way. They're going to find that information anyway. My recommendation would be, if you're a marketer, stick to your marketing information. If you're a nonprofit, stick to your core demographic, those things that you are really consistently good at and can speak to with efficacy. The reason that this is all important is because right now, all of us, every single one of us, has lost our second and third places. And by that, I mean the first place is home. The second place is your workplace. We've lost stay-at-home orders. So many of us are not going into work and doing this thing. The third is the coffee shop, the bookstore, the place that you like to frequent, the game store, the anywhere, the art galleries, the theater, the museums. Anywhere that you would generally get away from those other two things, or even maybe combine those other two things in new and neat ways, those are gone. And so along with that, our core identity has really been stepped on. And it's difficult with a crisis that is, immediate. So, snowstorm, shut down these businesses and so on. I can't go in and get my coffee. I can't, that's fine. That's temporary. Here, we have a much more long-lasting crisis where we are impacted not just on a daily or hourly basis, but on a weekly basis and a monthly basis. And the impact to our identity is really profound. And it's going to stick with us in ways that are things that philosophers will write about. Okay. So from a marketing perspective, what I can tell you is that it's going to create a really profound shift in how people are spending their money, how people show up in spaces, and how people will attend events, other things like that, and what they are looking for from you in order to reclaim aspects of their identity that are now missing. They're big chunks of the puzzle piece that is you that are inaccessible at the moment, because you are not that guy that goes and talks to 5 people at the coffee shop about your business. You are not that person who can go and talk competently about local art at the moment, because there's not that gallery opening that's occurring. So really understand how that will impact your customers, your clients, impact your service area, in that they're looking for ways to reconnect with that identity. And the most important thing that you can offer them is a way to do that. So showing up for your community in that way to provide them with the sense that, hey, we're here, even though all this craziness is happening, we're still here. Now, the immediate impact of that was, quick, let's go out and buy gift cards. Let's go out and support these things. Let's go and do these, let's try and support Main Street and whatever else we can do, which is great. That is awesome. But it's unsustainable in the long run, because buying a gift card is not the same as doing the thing. Being in the coffee shop, showing up to the bookstore, going into the game store, playing the thing, meeting with the community, interacting with the person behind the register. All of these things are really tricky right now. Giving your community, your customers, your clients, your community that way to interact with you is really vitally important. So one of the big things I love to do, I love to teach. So I'm here doing webinars. I go and the first 2 things I did were right after the crisis occurred, were having a webinar, which just sounds ridiculous, but it's like, this is how I check in with my community. And so for me, it was, let's have these conversations. Let's bring people together. Let's start sending all these emails. And I'm here. Let's talk about what the issues are. Let's find things that you need to, because that's how I show up in the community. Let's say I was not a marketer, I was a teacher. I would be maybe trying to create resources. And we've been seeing some of this. The 2 great examples of this in our community, the NoCo Live at Home show, where the musicians just immediately stood up and they created this massive online concert series every Saturday. And they have the Venmo links for all of their artists, and all of the artists are coming in and playing and doing all their stuff. The second great example of this is the NoCo Virtual Farmers Market, where people were able to order their custom made food and other things like that, their home goods, their crafts, other things that they couldn't go to the marketplace for. They couldn't go to the shops and support them in that way. And so these marketplaces of events and ideas started popping up. And so if that marketplace doesn't exist for you, the very first thing that you should do is look to your core resource hubs. So the Loveland Chamber, the Small Business Development Center, the Loveland Business Development Center, the city resource pages, your local organization for arts and culture, whatever else, nonprofit hubs. The Poudre River Public Library District just launched a great nonprofit resource page and group that they meet I think it's every month on a Wednesday. These things are great to get involved in, and your resource hubs are really the places to start this conversation. Right now, co-opetition is the key phrase. There are people that will want to buy from you, but they also want to tie in other things, tangential things. So a great example of this, Life's a Booch Kombucha started doing home delivery. They were 100% dependent on taps. All their taps got shut down when the restaurants started getting closed. They had to shift and pivot. And so Rachel started doing home deliveries. And those home deliveries now have gotten her just as much revenue to keep sustaining her business as she would have gotten through those taps. So the direct to customer sales have increased her bottom line, and she's hit capacity. She literally cannot make any more kombucha right now. She is sold out. So that is a great success story out of something that was an immediate level crisis. She was able to connect with her customers. And keep in mind, she did this without having an email list. She did this without having any other direct line with her customers or even any operational stuff set up to do this, just gumption. Okay? And if that is not a heartening story, I don't know what is. So what I will tell you is keep your head on straight, get good at what you are good at, and continue remembering what you are good at. Don't try to be something that you're not, so stay consistent. Have a way of connecting with your community in the way that they want to connect with you, right? And understand that those things they may be modified from the in-person business that you did. They may be completely different. So one of the game stores, for instance, that is here in Fort Collins, I've been looking to them to do, virtual D&D, like let's spin up a character, or let's do something like, have a board game night. Maybe they don't have the board game. They have the board game in the store. You can buy a copy, let's all do a virtual version of this game. That would be an amazing thing to do. They haven't done it yet. I keep waiting for it to happen. These interactions are not necessarily easy, but right now they're absolutely necessary. So I would say that if you have some flexibility and the ability to sit and plan right now, it's a great time to get clear on your goals, to get clear on how you want to connect to your community, and to start building up the tools so that you can connect with your community. If you don't have an e-commerce store or a way to connect with your audience through email or other mechanisms, and they're expecting to be able to do that with you, then this is a great time to think about the right way to do that and then do it. The Loveland Chamber, the SBDC, the Loveland Business Development Center all have great resources in order for you to do this. In fact, Dixie, I have a cool webinar for you. That was one of the two that we did at the very beginning that I can send your way so that people can get started with e-learning. It has Ben McConnell from the Loveland Business Development Center, and he's amazing. So those are the first big considerations. There was, and kind of is, this icky feeling about doing business during a crisis. And I think that that's a really important mental block to just completely erode. Now, if you're out there like trying to sell toilet paper or something, and your hoard that you've stacked up, this is not advice for you. This is bad. This is bad. Don't do that. But what I will tell you is that you should understand the difference between utility and value, right? So there's a huge difference in the utility that an accountant provides. The accountant gives you your taxes. They might get you set up with, the PPP loan or whatever else, right? Now, what they give you is, I don't have to learn all of that accounting crap, and I don't have to learn all of the horrible tax law in order to get, somebody paid and stay out of jail, right? So that's the peace of mind they give me. I have people to do the taxes. I don't have to worry, and that's mental weight that is off my shoulders. That's the value. Now, if your accountant goes above and beyond and they have fresh baked cookies when you go in, and they have, partnership with other businesses that you can leverage, and they go that extra step. They do the bookkeeping for you, for instance, so you don't have to jump into QuickBooks ever. Those are all things that add to their value. It's not just the utility of they do the bookkeeping, they do the taxes, they do the whatever. Now, I see we have a Axon Martial Arts Academy. Okay, so it's not just that people's heart rate gets increased and that their muscles get worked, right? It's so much more than that. It is the connection with each other in the community, the folks that are participating with each other, getting strong, maybe learning some self-defense, getting more confident in themselves and how their body works. All of these things are value versus the utility, which is got the heart rate up. Lots of things can get the heart rate up, right? Walking around the neighborhood can get the heart rate up, and that's also good for you. But it's not as good as having a community that you belong to, which is part of your identity, which is also doing virtual classes or other things right now to bring people together, to get, adults that time to resume their workout schedule, even if they are staying at home. That's an amazing thing. So value, utility, know the difference, and understand that when customers are seeking you out, in terms of marketing, the most important thing you can do is give them that sense of value, because that establishes that community. Okay. So it's not about playing board games for the game store that I mentioned. It's not about playing board games. It's not about rolling a D&D character so that they can eventually, sell people D&D equipment. They don't care about that. What they care about is bringing people together to do the thing, to connect with fellow geeks, right? So I'll give you another example of this. Fort Collins Comic Con started doing podcast interviews with artists, local artists, talk about their work, how to connect with them, because all of the artists can't go to their shows. Denver Comic Con just pushed their con until November. Starfest is delayed indefinitely. Cheyenne Gaming Convention is gone. So all of these artists who had their livelihoods built around the shows created by other people now have no place to show their art besides online. And so the transition to e-commerce has been rapid and really intense. And they have so much to figure out and learn from this process that it becomes critical for them to not only get started in how do people pay me online, but also how do people interact with me when I am doing commissions or other things like that. What are they expecting from me? How do they participate in that way? What are they looking for? How do they shop online? So the learning curve is huge. So for us, just to learn Zoom or something like that is one thing, but for them, it's a lifestyle change. They can no longer, so they've started up Discords, which is like a big virtual chat with audio and video if you want. It's sort of like a Zoom, but massively multiplayer. There are so many things that they are trying to learn all at once that it is just, and they're doing it on top of their 9-to-5 job if they still have it, or working from home if they can. This is a massive shift for them. So I would say that things can always be worse, but the people that can jump in and help support their community in ways that are useful and helpful are the ones that will be remembered as doing this crisis well, if there is such a thing as doing a crisis well. So we've talked about agency. We've talked about identity. Agency is just giving your customers the ability to feel useful and like they're connected well to their identity. They have the choice to connect with you or not. What I want to jump into next is this thing that we're all feeling with so many Zoom meetings and webinars and opportunities for our time is the pernicious effect of a content buffet. So early on, the artists, the musicians got this. They were like, we're going to do stuff from home. We're going to start these webinars. We're going to do this. So you could doodle at home with Mo Willems. And then the library started doing free virtual story times, and the museum started doing, downloadable things. And everybody and their mom is now doing a Zoom webinar for you to either learn meditation or relaxation techniques or something else. So you've got all of this massive swarms of content. And in the midst of your identity being completely upended, you now have this amazing buffet of choices to learn something new or to try something different. The Met is streaming live opera now. They're doing all sorts of different things that to bring you in. Broadway HD had a free trial that you can go in and check out Broadway shows. And so in the midst of this, if you're not in control of your emotions, and if you're not in control of your, I guess ambition would be the best word for it, then you could say, I want all the things and I want to learn about everything that I can. And it becomes really quickly tiring and draining on you. So understand that if that's happening to you as a business owner, it's also happening in mass effect to your customers who are also dealing with homeschooling and trying to find resources, who are also dealing with having their significant other or roommates or other people in their house at the same time that they wouldn't normally have. And that their second and third places being gone, they're going to start reaching out and dipping their hands into this buffet, trying to figure out. That's a really gross metaphor. I don't like that metaphor. Let me change that. They're going to start scooping out of the buffet. And they're not going to have as much attention for you where their attention was already very limited to begin with. So understand that those things will occur, and that by being consistent and showing up in a regular way, that you can provide them with a distraction that is timely and well-timed and well thought out. And your business that distracts them from, the things that are occurring on the news, your nonprofit that distracts them from things that are occurring on the news and the bad things, as it's being consistent, those are the considerations that you'll want to take into your content schedule. Now, if you don't have a way to easily get your content schedule, you will want to consider something like Airtable. Give me a second. I'm going to share my screen here with you. So this is Airtable. Now, what I will tell you is that to avoid the constant buffet of content, you can create a mechanism for yourself to easily share out information on a regular basis. I do not get any sort of referral fee. Airtable is free, so I'm just letting you know that right now. You can go there and sign up on your own. It's totally free to use. Content calendars. This is an example of their content calendar. You can modify this. It's sort of like a fancy spreadsheet, okay? Each of the spreadsheets can be tied to other tables inside the same sheet. So you can say like, oh, I'm going to put things on the Facebook page or the Instagram page or the Twitter page, and you can split them out so that you can easily manage them. Freelancer timesheets, this is, let's say you wanted to track if you need to pay freelancers for their content or other things like that, you can also just delete the table. So all of these templates exist for you to be able to use for free right away and allow you to do things like content creation. You can do a social media calendar and have demos and displays, the categories that you split out into. And if you're not, a data scientist, some of this can be a little bit heady, but the templates give you really good examples to be able to work with. There's blog calendars, so you can put your blog calendar together this way. Event planning, not so useful right now, but there are a ton of other templates that you can use. Local business, so you can put your product catalog in there, expenses, other things like that. Project trackers. If you're like me, you had about 5 million different ideas of things that you wanted to accomplish during this time. You can throw everything into a project tracker, put it into a category, indicate the tasks that you need to complete for that, indicate how important each of those tasks are and how long those things will take so that you are able to be honest with yourself about time. The second thing that I will show you outside of Airtable, and I'll put a link to this in the chat, is the FC.gov business website that has all sorts of good information. And they also have nocorecovers.com, I believe, which is information about all of the great Recovery Act information, the CARES Act, the Payroll Protection Plan, IDL loans, and other things like that, which are good to know about just as a small business owner. But in terms of keeping consistent with your marketing, being able to pay for it is one thing, being able to stay in business is another, and then also being able to track your stuff. Whether you need help with content or not, the project tracker is where I usually send most of my clients to make sure that they're in the right spot and able to keep themselves organized. Okay, so Airtable, highly recommended, something that I think is super useful for you. The next thing that I will tell you is that when we are in moments of crisis, and it doesn't matter what type of crisis, but change could be this thing, right? There is a tendency to externalize a lot of that pressure. There is every interruption that we have from children, every weird interaction right now that we have with the news or a commenter or even a bad review, right? These things, because we don't have the bandwidth anymore, get very quickly transferred. They call it transference. And you transfer these emotions to other people. It's just like, man, there's a lot, and you start going off on people, right? Now, if you don't have the capacity to handle any more stuff, it's important that you either bring in some help to figure that out, or that you start working on that either through meditation, breath work, whatever else it is. Those techniques that we use to keep ourselves calm before we go in and have the big power meeting, or before we try and launch a new project or meet with a new client, those techniques are important to do before almost everything now. Any public interaction, anything where we're going to be showing up and face to face. It's very vitally important, especially on Zoom meetings, that we keep ourselves at least neutral, because if we show up in a negative way for other people, that transference goes way, way beyond what we had ever wanted to do. And I know this sounds like gobbledygook, right? But it's true in your content too. And it's true across your Facebook messaging, how you respond to comments. And we've seen this in the way that if somebody handles a comment badly and they start getting trolls and whatever else, then it just snowballs. So when we're doing this virtual meeting, it's still difficult because we don't catch all of we're doing other things, we're not paying full attention, we're not catching all of the facial expressions, the body language, the posturing, and all of the rest of that. It can be really difficult to read intent under those circumstances. And so it's an amplifier. So if I show up and I'm scattered, I'm going to make you scattered, which is just horrible. We cannot do that to our customers. We can't do that to our community. It's a complete violation of our trust. So take a breath when it comes to like going on before you jump onto a Zoom meeting, maybe a quick 5-minute meditation or something to quiet yourself down so that you're at least showing up neutrally. And if you can show up in a better mood than your participants, then that's great. That's something that will translate down the road. And we also have to be cognizant of time. Everybody, like I said, is throwing these webinars or doing other things, or they have a loan to start firing up, or they have staff that they have to manage, or other things like that. There's going to be a lot of content that's out there. And so time becomes really important too. That's why I recorded this webinar, so that we can make sure that it gets out to the people that couldn't attend live, and they can watch it back at 2 times speed, because I'm much more entertaining in high speed anyway. The goal is just to make sure that we're respecting time. And that's why, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to start taking more questions from you. We'll get those going, and you can, hopefully get exactly what it was that you hoped for out of this webinar. If we show up and try to do, things that are useful and we don't deliver on our promise, that's another huge violation of our trust. And right now, that is just egregious. We cannot do that to people. We have to deliver exactly what it is that we said we were going to do, which is hopefully, in this case, showing up and learning about marketing during a crisis. So we've talked so far about consistency. We've talked about identity and how your customers, your community are hoping to interact with you, and how you can use consistency to engage with them in that way. Consistency in both your messaging and your voice, your branding, what your expertise is. If you're a nonprofit, what your area of expertise is. We've talked about identity and agency. We've talked about agency in that they want to interact with you in a way that is useful to them right now, and consistent, so that it's not just a constant interruption for their time or their attention. We've talked a little bit about the pernicious effects of a content buffet and what that does to people, and how we can deliver on good content outside of that. So we, at the beginning, had a question about advertising, paid advertising. And I think that can be useful. If you're doing that for the very first time, don't go it alone. Do not do it on your own. I'll actually, I think that was Abrina who asked the question. Abrina, I will get you a specific contact for that, somebody who can help you with that in particular. Brility Digital is very good at marketing in terms of ads. And so I will point you in their direction, but I'll give you a personalized connection to somebody over there. I don't get a kickback for that. It's just, they're very good, and I want to make sure you get handled correctly. We talked a little bit about intentionality and showing up yourself as a business owner, and making sure that you, or as a representative of a nonprofit or a company or organization, showing up with that intentionality and making sure not to be scattered, making sure that you're flowing well, and that you don't show up as a grump in a webinar, because that doesn't help anybody. And so the other thing that I will tell you is that if you have employees right now and they're still with you, and that you're paying them through the PPP loan or other things like that, they are in need of grace. And grace in terms of every little annoyance, every mistake that they could possibly make is so much worse to them right now, because they're in this mode of like, oh man, I can't screw this up. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to do this. I'm going to, and their stress is just out of control. Giving them a little bit of grace and understanding, like, hey, we're all here together right now. We're all dealing with this. I screw up, you screw up, everybody screws up. Let's just take a breath and start over and do it again. Right. Because your employees, if you have them, or your volunteers, if you don't have employees, or your representatives who are brand ambassadors, maybe, they need to know that you're there for them. And they also need to know that you have their back and you are showing up as a leader, because as the leader, the business owner, the nonprofit VP, the organizer, whoever it is, you are the leader, the de facto leader of the community. As a business owner, you're a de facto leader in your community too. And you have to have a little bit more capacity. It's not fair, I get it, but you have to have more capacity than the people around you to accept and understand that issues will crop up and that things may not turn out exactly as you had planned or hoped, or that other people had planned or hoped. So, customers, I'm seeing a lot right now with e-commerce. Customers are really antsy if something doesn't get shipped right away, or if something, UPS has some sort of issue or other things like that. They are right on that customer service email, like getting ready to rail. So I've seen a lot of success in teaching and espousing this idea of grace. Like, man, we're so sorry. We understand this is frustrating. This is a big deal that you need to, have this, and we just can't get it to you as fast as we would like to with the state of the world right now. And really not externalizing that blame, but just, feeling it with them, especially if you weren't the one that screwed up. But even if you were the one that screwed up, you can say, man, we really screwed up. I'm sorry that we, let you down. This is not consistent with how we want to behave right now. We're working on it, and we just ask for a little bit of patience while we work through it. That level of customer service or interaction with the world, or interaction even with your employees, can help alleviate a lot of different marketing concerns for you. Where marketing tends to go by the wayside is when things go completely in the dumpster fire, and there's so much stuff to handle all at once that we forget that we're dealing with real people on the other side, or we're dealing with real customers, and we're dealing with employees who have come to work for us for a reason. And they need us to teach them in this moment that it's okay, and that almost every mistake is not a fatal mistake, right? We can say, it's going to be all right. We can deal with that. We'll handle this. And giving them that grace and showing that grace through your own actions, laughing off your own mistakes, or, figuring out how to improve yourself through this process is going to be really important. I've seen some businesses go as far as doing like meditation classes, or sending folks links to like Skillshare or Udemy or other places like that, and saying, an hour today, spend some time learning something brand new that's really interesting to you. It does not have to be business applicable, because good business owners know that random skills can sometimes reinsert themselves in cool ways into the workplace. And so Udemy, Skillshare, other places like that, meditation hours, Taekwondo, or other martial arts, other things like that, can have a really positive effect on employee well-being, which then has a positive effect on customer service, marketing, the ambassadors' relationships to the world, because they are able to interact better and have more capacity for handling customers who may not have that capacity whatsoever, in terms of being able to handle things that they didn't expect. Unexpected failures create a slew of customer service issues under the best of circumstances. And here we are in the really dire circumstance of, we can't leave the house. Now what? And those institutions, if they don't show up for us, boy, oh boy, I'm going to lay into that customer service person. And if they have no capacity because they're homeschooling their kids, they're, bickering with their significant other, that's too much pressure. And we, as business owners, nonprofit leaders, organizers, can help alleviate some of that pressure by just, boy, let us let you decompress a little bit, and we've got bandwidth for this. It's okay. So the last thing that I will tell you before I open up questions is, avoid buzzwords and jargon and worrying about SEO keywords right now. Communicate to your audience as if you are a human, because you are. And the best thing that you could probably do, even though it's a little bit late right now, you can conduct a needs analysis with your audience if it's relevant. It's something that I think a lot of businesses that are responsible they don't assume, they ask. They understand what it is that their audience needs and what they want. I'll give you an example of this. One of the very first things we did with Startup Week was, where are you at? What issues do you have? What are you struggling with right now? And what should we be building, either a course or pulling a speaker in to talk about right now? What do you need from us? Because we're that marketplace of ideas, right? And so it just makes sense for us to be in that capacity. For you, it might be, do you need information on, local delivery services, or which restaurants are open, or what, these types of things that you could sort of tack on. And that gives you the ability to be useful in a time of crisis. And that utility in that sense is really useful. And, as I said, again, don't forget the value of your business versus just the straight up utility of it. If you're providing something beyond what, for, in my instance, is marketing, right? So yeah, stuff gets posted, we get right blog posts, whatever, like, we market, cool. We get connect with customers, but it's that stress of knowing, like, hey, your messaging is handled, we're consistent, we've got this down, all the rest of that stuff. That value, that stress relief that we give to the business owners is really powerful. And that's where we've stuck with most of our messaging. And that messaging is really hopeful by default, right? I'm here to help. There is nothing more hopeful than that. Knowing that somebody somewhere has your back. That's hopeful messaging. And so when you talk about how do we avoid the negativity bias of a lot of, the crisis mode that we're all in, be useful, be helpful, have somebody's back, your customers, your clients, your community. Talk about the good work that tangential partners are doing, bring them into the fray, and be really good about, lavishing praise on the people that are doing great work in your community. Because it's hard to show up intentionally and do good work right now. It's hard, or at least harder than it was. And so nonprofits, man, that's a completely different ballgame too, because not only are you looking at, well, how do we serve the needs of our customers, our clients, but how do we also honor our donors who are either stepping up or stepping back? And those are really big questions that require a lot of forethought and a lot of consistency in terms of tone and marketing. And how can we be helpful to both of those audiences at once? Because they require completely different marketing perspectives. So with that, I will open it up for questions. And, feel free to raise your hand. I'll call on you one at a time. If you know how to do that, either you can do it in the chat or using the participant icons, and just, either raise your hand or give me an icon and I'll give you a call. Dixie.
So it's interesting you brought up Udemy. I'm taking a certified social media class right now. So, hey, you get certified through it and it's online. So I love that you said get educated on something that maybe you didn't know, but you also want to learn more about it and then get certified. So my question for you, Nick, is I'm going to start doing interviews for our members. And what tool do you think is best that I'm going to do just like 30 seconds, asking them what their needs are, like you're just saying, give us a little commercial about your business. What tool do you think is best for that?
Are you, to clarify the question, are you doing video or audio?
Video.
Okay. I would use, I would use Zoom, honestly. And I know it's sort of silly at the moment because, they say they've got these great, security holes and whatever. They actually patched quite a bit of this stuff. They have a security button down here now. Anyway, I would use Zoom because it's super easy to separate out the recordings. You can just grab the piece that you want, and you could have multiple members in at once and mute them all and just pull in one at a time, and they can each play off of each other as they're doing this thing, and you can have multiple interviews going at once. So it saves you a boatload of time. It allows you to get multiple things done at once, and everybody can sort of see each other and have that moment of catharsis of like, hey, everybody, we're going to walk through this. You can learn about each other, and you can learn what each other does. And we're going to record this for a really quick interview. You can see what types of questions we're asking. You can see how, your contemporaries have answered this question.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Abrina, it looks like you're off mute. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So have you had any issues with the recording quality for Zoom? And if so, what have you found has been the biggest issue that causes that issue?
So it absolutely helps to have a dedicated line straight into your router. It helps to make sure that you're directly connected into your router. So that's number one. Understanding the environment of your home Wi-Fi is a good thing to do, just to make sure that you've turned off, all of the bandwidth heavy things, as many of those things as you can. Politely asking your significant other or some other, anybody else in your family or friends or whatever who is in your household, roommates, so on, to please lay off the bandwidth for the next, X time. And if all of those things are really difficult, then, the public libraries generally have really good Wi-Fi, and you can sit outside in your car and record in that way. And that's the last thing that you can do as a backup. Now that's just bandwidth, right? The other two considerations, you should have good audio. And so I actually have, you can't see it. I'll try and bring it up here. This is a Yeti, a Blue Yeti microphone. And it's the external sound that I have for me while I'm on these webinars and other things like that. You don't have to go that expensive or that crazy. Blue makes a number of really good microphones, and one of them is the Snowball. And I think it's about $40 or something right now. And it's an internal condenser microphone. So sound is one of the more important considerations. Even if you get totally horrible video, you can adapt it with good audio. And then you can put up a splash screen or something like that. I've done that with videos where somebody has a really horrible connection. I stop what they're doing and I just take a freeze frame of them frozen, stretch it out over their video where they've got stuck, if they're jittery or whatever. As long as their audio is good, I can use that, and nobody knows the difference right now, because it is just everybody gets it, right? We're all at home, we're stuck. If you have great Wi-Fi, awesome. If you don't, we get it. Understand also that if you have if you are geeky or have a geek in your life, the limitations of your router. So the further away from your router, the more walls you have. If your microwave is on, sometimes all of these things can interfere, and so that can cause issues.
Will it interfere with the sound quality as well? Because I have a Shure microphone and I've just gotten really shoddy recordings from my end. And I'm like, what? It sounds so sexy on Audacity, but it doesn't sound sexy on Zoom. And
so it's a difference of the tool that's being used. So you can indicate in Zoom which source you're pulling from. So make sure your source is solid. And also, it never hurts to record a local copy of your own audio.
Okay.
And so I started out doing, I teach some classes on Skillshare too. So on my Skillshare classes, I'd have my phone sitting right here with me, and I would record my voice on that as a backup to my SLR camera that I had recording me. And then I would also have this fired up, and then I just compared and contrasted where I was at. Also understand the pattern of your microphone can crazily change your things. But that's those. So the other consideration too is the webcam that you're using. And right now I have an HD webcam hooked up to my computer. This is how I do this. Most of your phones, your iPads, other things like that will have a good enough camera that you can record using that. And so that's helpful. But it also depends on how old your phone is. I've seen really great quality stuff come out of iPhone 6 and above, and that generation of Android phones as well. It's typically, iPhone 6 Plus, that's where the cameras started getting really good, and they started doing more video and FaceTime type things. So that's my recommendation for that. So I have a question in chat from Brad. How do we move toward effectively doing business with less direct contact? That's a big question. So first of all, if you're an e-commerce, if you think about commerce in terms of e-commerce, The customer service is sometimes what they are after. So you might end up wanting to do a forward facing, give us a call if we can help you sort through our catalog. If you have a big catalog, if you have, a couple of very important things that you sell, then that could be a thing that you highlight instead. You can very radically simplify your product offerings. You could, if you have a service, give folks an ability to connect with you one-on-one, to get to know you in advance of your working with them. So give them a taster, give them, and Axon is still here. So I would say, give them the ability to bring in a buddy for their classes. A buddy day is a really cool thing where they can say, oh yeah, I really like this. This is really neat. If the instructors were supportive, the classes were supportive, the students were great too. So they get a chance to really interact with you as an audience. And that's one of the better things. When the audience's tolerance for bad Zoom and bad webinars is going to go down really quickly. And that's just a tendency of folks to have, short attention spans anyway, but especially now in a crisis when wasting time for somebody right now is egregious. Not just in us like wasting somebody's time, but them having the feeling that they have wasted time in a time and place when time's not a guarantee. And there's a lot of it to contemplate. That is a really big, that's a heady issue that is more prevalent now than it has ever been before. So not to traumatize you against marketing, but your stuff needs to get on point and quickly. And so practice as much as you can, as quickly as you can. Get really good at delighting customers, and that needs assessment never hurts, because you can get information directly from your customers about what will directly delight them. Okay, Donald, I see you have your mic unmuted.
When you do assignment photography working for businesses, oftentimes basically what you're doing is storytelling, and that storytelling. I think that with this remote environment that we're in, all of a sudden a lot of people can't have a client either into their premises or to demonstrate maybe a product or a service. And so either still photography or video can be very helpful in terms of doing that storytelling. And in fact, I've already had a call from a client who wants to emphasize the comprehensive nature of their manufacturing activity. And I'm going to be doing a photo shoot for them next week. We're all going to be in masks, but we're going to highlight some important things in their manufacturing process that really they've had clients maybe come in from another state to see before, and they may be able to communicate that now without the client even traveling here. And of course, traveling is really hard these days. You can drive, but it's hard to fly, Mm-hmm. And so I think that if I pay attention to looking for people that have storytelling needs like that, and if we can do it in a manner in which we can keep our social distance and limit our exposures.
The idea of storytelling in the best way that you can is really important. So for a nonprofit, it might be telling the cool story about your volunteers. For you as a photographer, an assignment photographer, it might be really important to find a client who's worked really well with you in the past and take cool pictures of their employees, wearing their masks and still doing all the cool stuff that they can in the storefront, standing 6 feet apart, obviously, but, to highlight them in that way, like they're still here for you. They're still doing, or essential businesses, highlighting, a neighborhood nurse or other things like that, a neighborhood doctor, a neighborhood, provider. Those things can be really heartening, and telling that story in that way. If you have an employee who's, moonlighting as a nurse or as a phlebotomist, or anybody who could be, or somebody who was furloughed and now they're working at Safeway or King's or one of those other, they could be, we can't wait to have you back. But until then, we're happy to lend you to King Soopers and, whatever else. So that method of storytelling is really impactful and helpful. Let's see, Axon posted in here, trying to be prepared, I started my first free community class on Zoom, streamed to Facebook Live 10 minutes early, which meant many minutes of my Facebook Live event was a waste of time. Hopefully the audience will give me a second chance. Yes, so everybody will forgive the first one. And you can actually, on Facebook Live, you can go and edit the video and trim it to be just the right length of when your video started. So you just go into the video, the post itself, you click on edit video, and then you can trim it yourself. So if you didn't know that, look up trimming Facebook Live video in Google. It will help you solve that problem. The other thing that I've discovered that is helpful if I'm going to do a Facebook Live, I tend not to do Facebook Live unless I've absolutely got it down. So once I do something like a Zoom or a meeting like that, then I will post-produce it, make sure it's sharp, and then send that out as the thing. It also helps to have a secondary, an employee or a producer sitting behind the scenes who can help manage the Facebook Live, make sure that it actually works together, handles the comments while you're up there teaching the class and doing other things. That's the one tricky part about being a solopreneur in this time, is that if you don't have backup, it becomes a really tricky thing. So we have one more minute if you guys want to ask any more questions. Otherwise, I will hand it back to Dixie to talk about some other cool things that might be coming up for the Loveland Chamber. And I want to say big thank you to Dixie and the Loveland Chamber for having me today. And I'm glad that we could all connect and have this cool talk about marketing.
And thank you, Nick, for being here for us. I feel it was very valuable. How about you guys?
Yes, indeed.
But yes, we're using Zoom for our Leadership Loveland class. We have 2 webinars set up coming, and we do them every other week now instead of every month. We brought them closer together to have speakers. One will be on websites and, what do I have to change in my website now that all this is happening? So that will be a good webinar we're going to be having. And we're just doing our best to get out there any information, even if they're non-members, we still support them on the Loveland Chamber page. So please share with us any update of your business and just stay connected with us at loveland.org. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Dixie. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here today. If you have any follow-up questions, nick@wtfmarketing.com. Feel free to email me anytime. I am all around the web. Lead organizer of Fort Collins Startup Week and Fort Collins Comic Con, among many other things. And happy to share the resources and share the love. So feel free to connect with me, and happy to help anytime.